this is where things get fun. They get real fun. So you want to scroll on down to your give perk function. This is where when you buy the perk, this function gets called. Everything that happens here will happen to the player when they buy the perk. All right, we're gonna copy something from Space Cadet here real quick. And what this does is this will tell the player that they have the perk. There are probably multiple reasons this happens. It's time to talk about what Brawlstar Punch does. So Brawlstar Punch is a perk that I created the concept for way back when I was, I think it was before I finished up Space Cadet Cola. The idea for Brawlstar Punch is we're going to make it activate on key press. So basically what happens is when you have Brawlstar Punch, you press a key, and then you become invincible for 20 seconds and attract all zombies, and your weapons get taken away and you are given melee fists, which deal a butt ton of damage, and they have an area of effect attack, and you get like a fiery effect on screen. A burnout effect, like the Gobblegum burnout, is applied to zombies when they hit you, and yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to do. It sounds like Frenzied Guard, but I'm 90% sure that I had already concepted this before they did that. So yeah, Treyarch ripped me off. Anyway. So right now we're just gonna set some stuff up. I have a melee weapon. It took me the entirety of yesterday to get it figured out pretty much. I was doing other stuff in between figuring it out. The way that some stuff in APE works is if you reference an asset that is already loaded by the game, even if that asset is not in APE, it will still work when you get into game because the game has it loaded. The game knows it's there. APE does not know it's in the game because APE only sees what APE holds, and APE is not opening. Classic APE. Alright, so we got Brawlstar Punch here. I made a GDT for it. Basically, we got our fists here. All of the anims, every single animation for the fist is loaded in game. You'll see they have these little caution mark yellow signs here because the asset does not exist within APE, but it is loaded by the game. So even though these don't exist as far as APE is concerned, they will work once we get into the game because the game has them loaded. I ended up going in with HydraX and ripping the GDT for it, and I essentially just copy pasted that into my own GDT. So that's how I got the fists. You don't need anything else other than this bullet weapon asset. That's the only thing you need. You don't need any of the animations or stuff like that. But if you want to port like a weapon from a different game and then put it into here and use it with your perk, you're going to have to go through the process of ripping it with either Greyhound or some other program, running it through Maya to get it into like X model, X anim form, and then importing it into APE by setting up a GDT, creating an asset, and doing all that stuff. I am not going to go into that today. There are plenty of tutorials out there that show you how to do that. One that comes to mind is by Jaybird. He has some pretty good tutorials, at least in my opinion. So you can go ahead and check that stuff out if that's something you're looking forward to doing. But I've already got my weapon set up here. We just basically need to give it to the player. And actually, you know what? I do need a main function because I want a callback. Now, callbacks are really useful. We're gonna go with an on connect callback here, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But callbacks are really useful because they allow you to do things on a per player basis, like when an event happens. So a callback of on connect, when a new player joins the game, it'll run this function on them, the function that I'm then inputting in these parentheses. This is something that was not covered in the scripting guide. This is something that's a little bit more advanced. Basically, there exists a file called a callback shared within the shared scripts folder. We have root share raw scripts. These are all the default scripts that are in the game. So we have shared, which is used by both multiplayer campaign and zombies. And then we have ZM, which is all the zombie scripts. It's basically everything that you're going to be working with if you're working with zombies like we are here. We can find it right about here. Callbacks shared. When you want to call a function out of a different script, so you're operating in your Perk script here, your Perk GSC. When you want to call the function out of a different script, there's a way to do it. So you have to be using that script. That's the only way that you can call functions out of another script. If you don't, you'll get an error in the linker down here when you click the link and link your perk or your map. You'll get an error that says something like unidentified function, and then it'll complain about all that. So you want to make sure that if you're trying to use a function out of a default script, you throw that using statement up in there for the default script, and make sure that the file path goes to the correct thing. Otherwise, it will not find the correct thing. So when you use a function out of a different script, you have to go into that script and look at the namespace. The namespace should be just like this here, hashtag namespace, and then it'll have a word or a phrase here. And then what you do when you want to use something is you put that phrase here followed by 2 semicolons, and that tells it to go into the file with the namespace of callback and use this function out of that file. And what we're going to be putting into here is another function of our own, because it requires a function parameter. Let's just give it a really creative name here, Brawlstar player connect. And we're going to be calling a function out of our GSC. We're going to be passing it as an argument into this function that we're calling from another GSC. So let's create a function real quick. Function, we'll just copy paste this. Coders are lazy. So when you pass a function as a parameter, this is something else that wasn't mentioned, you do and followed by the name of the function, the name you declare it as, and that's it. That's how you pass a function as a parameter, right there. So that's that. When a player connects, we need to initiate a variable on them. So we say self, because self is the player in this instance. Self will be the player here. Self dot, because this is going to be a field, and then we do Brawlstar uses. And the reason I'm doing this is because this perk is going to be pretty overpowered in my opinion, and I know people are going to complain about it. I'm going to make it so that when you use Brawlstar Punch, when you use the ability, after your time runs out, it takes the perk away from you, and you can only buy the perk 3 times. We're defining this so that we can use it later on. When a player connects to the game, they get 3 charges of Brawlstar. They're able to use it 3 times. All right, let's actually give this a little bit longer name. Brawlstar Punch uses. Brawlstar Punch. Sure, let's just do Brawlstar Punch think. That'll work. And then we go down here, we create this function. And this is going to get run every time the player buys the perk. And what this is going to watch for is this is going to watch for when the player hits the activation key. The reason why we threaded this is because we're going to be running an infinite loop somewhere in here, and we want to make sure that it doesn't cause a connection interrupt when you drink the perk. Okay, so we're also going to need to add a couple more things here. Most of the stuff I show here won't really be used in other perks that people create. Some of it's pretty like niche stuff. So if you never end up using anything that you see here, That's why, because I do some special stuff. For those of you that don't know, and you're going to be scripting quite a lot, there is an API. Now, an API, again, for those of you that don't know, is a list of functions that exist within the game that you can use that you do not have to call out of another script. They just exist and you can use them anywhere. So to see all those, you go to your root directory, go into docs mod tools, and it's this first HTML document right here, button pressed. We're going to use one of the action slot buttons. Now the action slot buttons are things like the D-pad on a controller, or I think they're 2, 3, 4, and 5 by default on keyboard. I have mine set to 1 through 4. And these are like your shield, your gobblegum, and like the Maxis drone on Origins is bound to 3. I'm gonna use 3 as well here. Okay, so we're gonna do if self action slot 3 button pressed. So if that button's pressed, we need an end on here because this needs to end at some point. So do self end on, and this is another good reason why we have those notifies up there. Wait for this notify, and then once this notify gets sent to the player, this will stop. We also want this to end on death, so self end on death. That needs to be in parentheses, actually. So there we go. This infinite function, this infinite loop will stop if either of those two things happen. The player dies, or actually that needs changed. This function will only be active while the player has the perk. So we do not need to check if the player has the perk or not. On the other hand, we do need to check if the player is in the Brawlstar state, if they have Brawlstar Punch active. So that's where this comes into play. Brawlstar Punch active equals false is basically what I'm saying here. And they press the action button. Then we send a notify. And then we do need a wait here. And this is just so that we don't cause another connection interrupt. We'll just do 0.1. We don't need this looping that frequently. If Brawlstar Punch is not active and you press the button, then we activate it. We send a notify to activate it. I want to have a sound cue that tells the player that it's running. So like, I want to have it like say a voice line that I will record later and you'll probably end up hearing at some point. I want to have it play a sound, so we'll leave a line here for it to play the sound. Let me just actually comment that in right now. Play sound to player, I believe it is. We can double check that by going here and doing play sound to player. There you go. So we can play sound to a player, just give the alias name. The alias name comes out of your sound alias. So whatever name you give it in the sound alias is what you put there. I'm gonna actually deactivate the player's controls here. And the reason I want to do that is because I want this to be like kind of cinematic, you know? Disable invulnerability is important because we're gonna want to make the player invulnerable while this is happening. So we want to make the player invulnerable so that they don't die while this is happening. We need to make them invulnerable, lock their movement, take their weapon, give them fists, make all zombies attracted to them, and then let them rampage. Actually, I think I'm going to move all this into a different function because that will make it cleaner here. we get all the player's primary weapons, which are like the main 2 weapons that you can hold if you don't have mule kick, and it's 3 weapons if you have mule kick. We save the weapon that the player is currently holding. We save their ammo clip, how much ammo that they have in the clip, obviously. And then we save how much ammo that they have in their stock. And then we check if it has a dual wield. If it's dual wield, we save their dual wield ammo. If it has an alt fire mode, we save their alt fire mode ammo. And then we take the ammo, the weapon from them. This is something that I'm going to need to add as well. This is where we give the fists down here at the bottom. You can go to ZM Weapons and check out this function. It's in there. I'm not going to explain what it does. What this is going to do is it's going to, if you get a max ammo while you're in Brawlstar mode, sure, let's go with that. If you're in Brawlstar mode and you get a max ammo, this will wait until a max ammo has been gotten, and then this will set a value so that the player knows that they got an ammo, basically. And then once we give the weapon that we took away from the player back, if this value is true, they will get ammo for that weapon. It's a little system that I set up for Afterlife to make Afterlife a little bit better. So the next part is to make the zombies only go for this player. There's a couple ways we could do this. The way that I'm thinking right now, which is probably the most sensible and like best way to do it, is to increment ignoreme on every player that is not the player that's activating Brawlstar, which also means this could get messy with some custom perks, say Space Cadet Cola, for example. I'm just gonna make it nice and simple for myself. Another script that is good to mention is ZM Utility. This script has a lot of utility functions that are going to be used by everyone, period. Is player valid is one of them. Basically, it checks if the player is alive, not in last stand, if they don't have increment ignoreme, if they're not ignored by zombies. It checks a whole bunch of stuff here that you don't have to, you just call the function, you don't have to worry about it, and it checks if the player is valid. Okay, so we're going to use that in conjunction with getting all the players. I want to exclude self here. So we do array exclude, I believe it is, players self. Let me just double check that to make sure that's right. Go into shared, array shared, GSC. Yeah, here we go. It returns an array excluding everything that you put in here. It'll make players an array of every player that's in the game that is not this player, the current player that we're operating on. In this instance, player here is just like a placeholder. It's the thing that's used to reference each item in players that will be working within the for each loop. So what increment ignoreme does is it increases the count of this variable called self.increment_ignoreme, and self.increment_ignoreme is it's checked when the zombies are targeting players. It checks for if the value of self.ignoreme is 0, then the zombies are allowed to target that player. If it is 1 or greater, the zombies cannot target that player. So what we're doing is we're making each player invisible to the zombies, except for the player that is the Brawlstar Punch person. The player can't die currently, so we do not need to worry about fixing something here that gets messed up if the player dies, because the player can't die. They can disconnect, which we probably do need to worry about. We're gonna have a wait here that is the length of the sound time, because I want the sound to play and then I want the perk effect to activate. I want to put it like a fiery effect on the screen and then give the player some fire effects in the third person so that it looks like they're on fire. So it looks like what we need for this is a file called burnplayer. It's in the shared scripts folder. And then we also need to drop that into the CSC for our perk. Otherwise, we will get an error because it uses a client field, and when you have only half of a client field is a two-part thing. You need the GSC side of it and you need the CSC side of it. When you only have one half of it, it gives you, it returns an error that the client field wasn't set up properly. If you just want to edit like the length of time it takes to do something, or like a little tiny thing, if you put a define in there, it allows the person that uses it to have full like creative control over all the interlocking parts without actually having to dive into the script and break it down themselves. Weights are not exact. At least to the best of my knowledge, a weight is not exact. A weight of 0.1 is probably really close to being right. Like a weight of 1 is close to being right probably. But like a weight of 20, it's not gonna be 20 full seconds. It's not actually gonna be 20 seconds, at least to the best of my knowledge. It gets time in milliseconds from the start of the level. We save the time when the effect like starts. Stop will become the new time, so this will be a static value. It'll stay the same for the duration of this loop. We subtract this value from this value, which at here should be like at most some milliseconds. So this will be true. Then we do a wait. We update stop to the new time, the new current time value, and then we run our condition. And then once stop is 20 seconds of real time longer than start, this loop will break and will notify to deactivate Brawlstar Punch. We basically need to undo what we've done in here. I don't want to freeze controls. Oh, actually I need to unfreeze controls. That is true. Yeah, so we can just unfreeze controls right down here at the bottom. I would have figured that out eventually, because after being not able to move when I activate it, I would have been like, oh, I'm stupid, I forgot to re-enable the player's controls. The first thing that I want to do actually is I want to make sure that all the players get their ignoreme back, or that they are attacked by the zombies again. That's the first thing that I want to make sure happens, so that we can get right back into the action. Actually, let's make it the last thing that happens. I only want this voice line that I'm gonna put here. I only want that to play the first time that the player enters Brawlstar. But that's all the basic setup. We're gonna leave this there. Basically, if the script encounters an unrecoverable error, your linking will stop and you will have to relink once you fix it. So this says line, wait, hold on. Oh, okay, so that's because I put a single equals here. You have to use a double equals. Single equals changes the value of str result to this, whereas double equals compares the values of the two. Can you do something wrong? And let me just do ZM weapons. All right, let's try that again. All right, this time we should be good. I've been making a bunch of rookie mistakes right now. Got our lights, we got our little FX coming out. All right, we changed our perk cost to 500. Oh, okay, there we go. Well, I'm not invulnerable, I'm burning, and I don't have my fists. So something went very wrong here. I'm burning at the very least. Alright, so let's go back and troubleshoot what I've done wrong, what I've screwed up.